Hi everyone and welcome back to The Marketplace and I. Today I want to introduce you to some artworks that have been created by members from Piccadilly Support Services. Piccadilly Support Services is a social care charity that's located in Lancaster, and it helps a myriad of people to develop new skills, to build confidence, to meet new people, to socialise and to have fun. It's set in these beautiful 2 acres of garden, and as part of that they've created the most beautiful sensory garden. Part of the care, work and support that Piccadilly offers is that they run 2 autism support groups, and I had the privilege of working with these groups throughout 2019 in developing this project. I learned a lot from these groups. In particular, I learned a lot about the language that you should use when dealing and working with autism. So in particular, I learned that for many in the autistic community, they prefer to be labelled as autistic and defined as autistic, because for them their brain is not disabled, it just works in a different way, and their autism and their way of seeing the world is very much a part of who they are and how they see themselves and how they define themselves. So that was a really, really key learning for me. It's often within disability theory, there's sort of 2 schools of thought. There's people that argue that we should use person first language, person with disabilities, so that we are prioritising the person over the disability. And then there's another school of thought that says, no, we should be saying disabled person, because then you're identifying as a proud disabled person. There's a real split in that idea of what language should be used. So I found it really intriguing to hear that within the autism community and with those that I worked with, autistic first language was what they wanted, that they are autistic. I also learned other things. I learned that I'm an NT, a neurotypical, and that means that my brain apparently works in a more typical, normative or normal way, whatever those terms mean by today's standards, whereas many with autism view themselves as neurodiverse. I think that's a really lovely term. It's not in any way that autism is a disability. It can be debilitating, but it's not a disability. It's just that your brain works in a different way, and the way that you see the world is just different and diverse, and I think that's a really beautiful term. So before we start with looking at the artworks, I just thought I would conclude with this lovely quote that came from Joey from Piccadilly, where she really talks about this idea of defining herself as autistic. And so Joey says, "How can I not be defined by the way my brain processes the world, the lens through which I see things? Of course, autism defines me. Everything I am is due to it." And I thought that was a really beautiful quote that just helps sort of really show how people with autism want to be defined. So we'll come back to Joey in a few minutes as she's created a beautiful artwork for us. But now moving on to these artworks, this is a snapshot of all 3 of them together. Okay. But we are going to start with this top one here, which is entitled Autism Barriers by Amy Dobson. And as you can see, it's just a cacophony of colour and almost chaotic in some ways. Lots of colour and everything kind of blurring in together. And Amy purposefully wanted to showcase that because it symbolises how she sees her brain as working, and sometimes how her brain can become overloaded with all the senses and everything that's going on around her. In particular, she wanted to show the collage technique here, with using different cut and pasting from newspapers and magazines to give it a lot of vibrancy and also to give it a realness to it. When you look closely, you see a lot of champagne bottles, you see birds, you see sort of afternoon tea. Down here you can see crowds. And the reason for all of this is it symbolises how Amy feels when she goes into a lot of commercial social settings. She has to avoid places where there's lots of noise and lots of crowds. In particular, she has a fear in restaurants and cafes that there'll be the pop of the champagne bottle, that there'll be the burst of a balloon, or if she's out and about at concerts or anything like that, she has to avoid them because of the crowds. But also there's the fear that suddenly there'll be the fireworks, the bang of the fireworks. So how all those noises can really create chaos and uncomfortable feelings of tension within Amy. So that's a little bit of a tour of what Amy's work's about, and I hope that you've enjoyed this, because it really shows, in some ways, I think it's a beautiful representation of Amy's lived experience. And now moving down here, we have Stairs and Escalators by Bryan and Lindsay. And again, this is a collage technique, and it just shows some of the simple things that maybe we don't think about as being barriers into marketplaces and into social settings. So stanks, cobbled streets for for Bryan and Lindsay, they really do fear that they may trip up or they may slip on these, especially when wet. But both Bryan and Lindsay spoke about their fear of escalators. You see that right in the centre there of this picture. Their fear is that they don't know exactly what's at the top. There's a fear of falling through the gap. And there's a fear of not being able to get off the escalator in enough time. And so all of this in many ways hinders Bryan and Lindsay from fully integrating with the commercial world. They did say that most places now do have elevators, but not everywhere has elevators. And although they can at times use stairs, they said that sometimes the stairs, due to health and safety, are really hard materials, and it can create a reverberating vibration through their bodies, which makes them feel very uncomfortable and tense. So that hopefully helps you understand some of the lived experiences from Bryan and Lindsay. And now we move back over to Joey, who gave us that beautiful definition of autism earlier. So this is called Imprisoned, and it's by Joey Darke. And essentially it is a symbol of a wall. It's inspired by the 2015 Roger Waters film, The Wall. And what she wanted to show was the barriers to engagement with the marketplace. She created this mixed media piece, which incorporates everything from paint to polyfiller. And it's essentially examining the systemic stumbling blocks and negative judgments of peers and professionals that combine to form a barrier and a symbolic prison of infrastructure that keeps autistic individuals from full participation in trading activity and wider society. So it's a really, really powerful piece and what this represents. And as you move closer, you can see how this really is very wall-like. You know, you can see the polyfiller. It feels like a wall when you touch it. And the words that surround the sort of core word of public, of family, of these infrastructure systemic systems, the words that surround them is how Joey feels these systems and structures see and view and perceive her. So I'll just take you through so you can see some of these. And then as we move up to the top, you have further barriers of the barbed wire to further show how Joey and many with autism feel locked out or barriered away from not only the marketplace, but wider society. So it's a really, really powerful piece that helps to show Joey's and many others' lived experiences. So that's a whistle-stop tour of the works from Piccadilly. I hope that you've enjoyed these today, and we'll be in touch soon with another video. Thanks a lot, guys. Bye.